Hello, you're listening to Thinking Social and Solidarity Economy, an online series of presentations and discussions that brings you the people and the ideas that are defining how we understand more just and humane alternatives to social and economic life. Recorded at a live in-person event, in this episode, we bring you the 2024 Jack Quarter Lecture on Social Economy, organized by the Center for Learning Social Economy and Work at the University of Toronto. It features Professor Inés Heras of the National University of General San Martin in a talk entitled Solidarity Economies, Direct Democracy, Lifelong Processes, Learning from and with the Argentinian Experience.
Okay, well, welcome to the 2024 Jack Quarter Lectureship on Social Economy. On behalf of the Center for Learning Social Economy and Work and the Program in Adult Education and Community Development, we're very happy to be holding this year's lectureship with the Boise Graduate Student Research Conference. So thanks for the collaboration. My name is Marcelo Vietza, and I'm Associate Professor here at Boise. I'm Program Coordinator of APCD and Director of USO. I'm honored to introduce the 2024 Jack Quarter Lectureship on the Social Economy and to warmly welcome and thank this year's lecturer, Professor Inés Heras. She so readily said yes when we requested invited her to come. So thank you so much for Buenos Aires having me here. So first of all, I'm going to say a few words about the lectureship. The Jack Quarter Lectureship on the Social Economy is a memory and honor of Professor Jack Quarter, who passed away in early 2019 as full professor in the Adult Education and Community Development Program in the Department of Leadership, Higher and Adult Education here at Boise University of Toronto. For over 50 years, all of them here at Boise, by the way, Jack was a friend and colleague to many in the fields of adult education, community development, and social economy. A renowned researcher, prolific writer, and much-loved teacher, Jack mentored hundreds, if not thousands, of Canadians and others from around the world studying or involved in the social and solidarity economy. Jack helped found several groups that have been making a deep impact to Canadian society and scholarship, such as the Canadian Worker Cooperative Federation, the Canadian Association for Studies in Cooperation, the Association for Nonprofit and Social Economy Research, and its journal, the Canadian Journal for Nonprofit and Social Economy Research. Jack was also one of the research leads of the cross-Canada multi-year and multi-site social economy hub, which helped conceptualize and map the social economy in Canada. He wrote or co-wrote dozens of books and articles on the social economy, workplace and economic democracy, and labor issues, including co-authoring the much-read Understanding the Social Economy in Canada, Understanding the Social Economy in Canadian Perspective, and Understanding the Social Economy of the United States. Before his passing, Jack was also a finalist for the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada's Impact Award, recognizing the highest achievements in social sciences and humanities research, knowledge mobilization, and scholarship in Canada. So the Jack Quarter Lectureship is cared for and organized by the Center for Learning Social Economy and Work, which Jack helped co-found and is generously made possible by a donation from another renowned scholar of Canada's cooperatives and social economy, Professor Emeritus George Melnick from the University of Calgary. So we thank Professor Melnick for his kind donation. Professor Melnick only had one stipulation for how to use the funds for the lectureship: hold it at Boise. Hold it at Boise to keep Jack's memory present. So we are thankful to Boise, to Dean Erica Walker and her staff, and the conference organizers for their enthusiastic support in holding the 2024 Jack Quarter Lectureship during this conference. So we'll be holding a reception afterwards in the Nexus Lounge, so make sure that you come with us and celebrate with us. And also I want to say that Anna's books and materials from her center in Argentina are being sold here. So if you are interested, and it all goes towards worthy causes, the communities that Anna works with, and the center including as well. So without further ado, it's also my pleasure to ask one of our brilliant graduate students, Stephanie Chartrand, to come and introduce Professor Heras. Stephanie is an MA student in the program in Adult Education and Community Development program And also we'll be starting her PhD next year with us, so we're excited to have Stephanie with us. So, and she's also very active social and solidarity, economy, and community organizer. So Stephanie.
Good afternoon, actually, it's morning. I wish it was the afternoon. I'm tired. All right, so I am very happy introducing Professor Inés to the 2024 JQL Lecture on Social Economy. Professor Heras is a national researcher at the National Research Council of Argentina, and also a full professor in the School of the Humanities and the National University of San Martin. There she teaches graduate and undergraduate courses in critical community pedagogies and methodologies, community self-determination, self-management, community economies, and also coordinates the research program entitled Learning with Self-Governed Groups. Professor Heras earned her MA and PhD in the University of California, Santa Barbara's Graduate School of Education on a Fulbright scholarship with a focus on ethnography and sociolinguistics. Over the past 25 years, Professor Heras has developed collaborative research processes with worker cooperatives, social solidarity economy groups, and community organizations throughout Argentina. She is also the co-founder and president of the Buenos Aires Nonprofit Institute for Social Inclusion and Human Development, which works together with rural and urban marginal communities and organizations practicing more than just ways of organizing the social economic way. There's actually some books over here on the counter as well. So she also acts as a board member in the Transnational Community Economies Institute. Professor Heras has authored dozens of peer-reviewed articles, reports, books in both Spanish and English, including the co-authored book Creating Third Spaces of Learning for Post-Capitalism, Lessons from Educators, Artists, and Activists, which again is I'd like to ask now for the 2024 JQL Lecture on the Social Economy, Professor Heras to come to the podium.
No. Yeah, Mike. We'll get to Mike in a minute. Here, right? Muy bien. Okay. So I'll set my clock just in case, because I'm a talker. I love talking. So we'll be sharing with you some ideas, insights, and perspectives from an Argentinian point of view. And I will be spelling out three concepts as I talk: solidarity economies, direct democracies, and lifelong processes for learning. And I will not define those in starting, but I will be talking and providing examples and ideas so we can build on them, and hopefully during the Q&A we can share some of those ideas, definitions, or what have you. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody who helped me to get here safe and sound. There's very many people who collaborated at home and here, so I'm very grateful and honored. I've been having a great time. I love traveling to places that I don't know very much about, such as Toronto. I have been here before, but again, it's nice to be visiting and talking to people and engaging in conversation. So I want to start by acknowledging that tomorrow in Argentina is the day for Memoria, Verdad y Justicia. It's the day we all remember that nunca más, never again. Argentina has recently, not that recently now, but fairly recently gone through a dictatorship, very cruel, where when 13,000 people got killed, more than 1.5 million people had to migrate. And so that means that an entire generation is missing. And that even though that's the case, the learning experience of those people are still with us. And I will be providing examples how that happened and is still happening. This is what the marches look like. Tomorrow I'm going to be joining a march in Toronto because there's one march tomorrow for this day. And I want to portray the work of very courageous women who organized since the dictatorship started, Madres de Plaza de Mayo and Abuelas de Plaza de Mayo. They were looking for their missing ones, their sons and daughters assassinated, and we're still looking. Out of the 400 babies and children kidnapped, abuelas have identified 137 of those children who are now grown-ups. And what's interesting to me is that these organizations have passed along an experience through generations, and so that organizations of the sons and daughters also formed, as well as nietos y nietes. In Argentina, we're now using "y" to mean both female and male, so we're changing the language, which actually this administration has forbidden. You may know that Argentina has recently changed its administration with a very difficult orientation. I also would like to acknowledge and honor the fact that Argentina is a territory where diverse peoples of the land exist, have existed, and have resisted. These are the names and languages of the peoples of the land in Argentina, and I also want to highlight the fact that Africana descent people also populates our country. And one key aspect that I want to highlight here is that in the 18th and early 19th century, the Africana people organized in what they called nations. The nations were no other than mutual aid groups. So we can see that over time, there's a long tradition in our country, both that was there and that was brought in this case, because of enslavement, sadly to say, but also at the end of the 19th century, immigration waves brought people escaping from Europe as well, who organized in political parties and mutual aid groups, so on and so forth. So again, there's a long tradition of this kind of perspective that we may call the solidarity economies perspective. This is the story of Argentina, and this nation was founded over conquest. It was called Conquista del Desierto, meaning conquering the desert, as if there was nothing out there, which of course there was. And so this is again to portray the fact that there are tensions in our country that are being spelled out all the time in two different perspectives that I will get into in a minute. So I will be organizing my talk in 4 parts, hopefully. The first one is the context of my work. The second one relates to some recent history. The third one is the work we do with the peoples who we work. And if there's time, backstage. Some pictures and some things that may be cool to show if I get there. So teamwork about my work. My team is a large team, and here I have spelled out the names of the people with whom I spoke directly about this talk, and I also acknowledge other people with whom I didn't have a chance just because of time to speak, but they're present in what I'm going to say. All I'm going to say is my responsibility, so any faults are mine, but it's good to acknowledge that this is thinking in process, as we saw last night with Jean and Peter talking out loud and building ideas as they were sharing their thoughts. So this is the kind of work that we do in our team. But I would also like to explain, when I was introduced, I maybe you didn't catch it, but I belong to different organizations, and I want to explain how I do that, because that's part of what is enabling us to connect very local experiences with several other experiences and places in other remote geographies. So I belong to the National Council. It's a very competitive post. Once you get in, you're assessed every 24 months. So you have to always be running because the next evaluation comes in and so on and so forth. So that's part of my work, which I don't particularly like, but I have to comply to. I'm a professor at the university, but at the same time, I entered the council after coming from the United States. I co-founded this organization called Economies. And that's an organization that does community work on the barrio de Colegiales. Keep that Colegiales in mind because I will bring it in later on. And I was also a co-founder for the Institute of Community Economies, even though that institute has been formed by the work of 50 people, more or less, in the past 30 years, I think. So even though the institute was founded in 2018, to get to that point, a lot of people worked before that. I'm sort of a newcomer to that institute, but I was invited to join, and that brings a multi-geographical perspective to my work, which is very good for me. I will be entering the second part of the talk by spelling out these two ideas, these two notions. I put them here to mean they are intention. They're two different poles that we can think of, but I also want to spell out the fact that these poles are engraved in every single person, I may say, in Argentina. And I will try to explain this. Even I will put my own example because that's an easy one. It's me. Even though from an early age I was socialized in direct democratic organizations, and my life is full of the solidarity economy, I have also experienced at home, at a very patriarchal home, and because of the context in which I grew, this other pole, this very authoritarian, exclusive, and very exploitive frame. So what I'm trying to say here is that even though we may find projects and processes that are more inclined to one side or to the other, these are in constant tension, and within the organizations we work with, they also show. So that's one of the perspectives we bring to the work we do, because over time we have been able to observe these tensions and converse with people about them. The work I do in this program of research that I will be sharing with you today started in 2008, so it's a long time. I will walk you through some of the facts of more recent history in Argentina. If you take the period from 1930 to 1983, 53 of those years, 25 of those were governed by civil military coalitions. So again, this is to reinforce that that kind of authoritarian perspective or way of doing things is constantly present, is there. An economic regime of dispossession and exploitation and violent concentration of capital was put in place, mostly after the last dictatorship, and continues to go. But also, the solidarity economy continues to go. As I explained, it has a long trajectory in time and is still alive. So part of our duty, as I think my role as an activist first and researcher maybe, is that we uncover those experiences and we show they're there. There was a question yesterday about scale. Is it possible that the very local and the very tiny is important? Yes, that's my answer for sure. In terms of cooperatives, what does it look like? These figures are from last year. There's, let's see if I can say this. Numbers are hard to use. 24,344 cooperatives, good, I got it. Including workers' cooperatives and other types of cooperatives, out of which 86% are cooperatives for workers. This figure has gone up in the last 4 years. So that means that maybe more and more people, one interpretation could be that more and more people are wanting to work in this kind of organization and way. There may be other reasons, and we can discuss that later on. For example, this reason, that is, people are laid off or factories closed and factories are recuperated and then cooperatives are formed. So this is the scenario for this part of the conflict. Going into what happened in the rural areas, and remember that I was explaining to you that the last dictatorship took place in between 76 and 83, but prior to that, there were other dictatorships as well. And this model of extractivism kept on building on. So landowners, big landowners in the 60s started pushing the borders and using pesticides and toxics. And at the same time, coalitions resisted. For example, there's the Ligas Agrarias that I will be talking about in a minute. The Ligas Agrarias in the northeast of our country organized in small cooperatives to resist these actions. So again, we see this movement back and forth between these two different perspectives. So these coalitions and organizations use from the longest time that is documented, assembly-like format to make decisions. So in that respect, these organizations would be framed as spaces where democracy is practiced in the day-to-day, in the everyday day. And these coalitions confront at least two issues that we have been able to document. One is the violence from the outside, but the other one is the conflicts in the inside. Partly those conflicts, as I was saying, come out of perspectives that are present in these kinds of organizations, that one perspective may be more leaning towards direct democracy and horizontal ways. Other perspectives would be more leaning to becoming, for example, one person the leader and wanting to co-opt the organization's work, so on and so forth. So these things do happen in these organizations, and that's part of the work we do, try to understand that and see what it means and why would that happen and for what reasons those things turn out. This is a map that shows you 32 conflicts that are happening now in Argentina, where organizations are fighting against ecological disaster. So over issues of mining or agribusiness, nuclear weapons, or control for water, these things are going on. So again, the territory is very dispersed in a way, in the sense that there's very many conflicts happening at the same time. Yet at the same time, the territory is very connected. I mentioned the organization Ligas Agrarias, and there is another organization on the west in Santiago del Estero that is called MOCASE, Movimiento Campesino Indígena, Santiago del Estero. Those two organizations, for example, have been able to network so that they inform these organizations that are fighting locally over their conflicts with strategies that they have built over time. So again, this is knowledge that is passing along, and the learning experience takes a life, one's life and people's life over time and transgenerationally. So I get now into the third part of my talk, which is what does this look like in the organizations we're working with, and what kind of work we do with the organizations we work with. And keep in mind again that I'm trying to set up the scenario so that later, maybe when we share our thoughts, we can come up with what we understand with these concepts. Our work is organized in what we call the program. I think that's the best way to translate it, not sure though. That means an overall way of thinking about what we do. And our overall question, our general question is, how do people learn to self-govern and self-organize? And with this, I want to bring a biographical fact, which is before getting into academia and getting my scholarship to go abroad, I was a worker at a cooperative of workers. So I'm not born and raised as an academic. I got into academia. That's why I said I'm first an activist and a worker. And out of those 7 years of experience in the cooperative, I had the chance to experience direct democratic processes and all the tensions that I've been filling out. And also, I got the chance to ask myself the question of how do we learn this? Because usually the organizations we're all socialized in, I'm sure in Canada is true, but at least in Argentina is true, are hierarchical. And we have to obey and to play with rules, whatever that it's not to our power to change. In cooperatives of workers, every member has the right to express their word and debate, argue. I would cry when I argued at the cooperative because of the passion that we were involved in. So those kinds of things are part of my bodily experience. And I guess yesterday, Jean was saying, how do you frame a question that keeps with you over your whole life? That has happened to me. At that point, one of the ways we found that was good to socializing people into the cooperative world was to have padrinos y madrinas, godmothers, godfathers, right? Which is a word I don't quite like, but anyhow. So I did come with this idea at that point because when I was new to the cooperative, initially there was also a question about the new ones and how they got in and this and that. As a new person, I was realizing I was quite busy catching the norms and the ways people related with cooperative, even though they were very spelled out. And so I got this idea of asking for volunteers who were members of the co-op that were there for longer than I was, of course, to accompany people to get into the co-op. So that was one way in which that happened. So the work we do is organized in strands, and today I'm just going to share 3 strands, because there's more, and 3 organizations within those strands, because otherwise it will be forever, and we don't want it to happen today. And I will also frame it as co-elaborative work. When Stephanie was introducing me, she stumbled upon the E, which is on purpose, so good for you. To call attention to that theme. And again, I will not define what we mean, but I will explain what we do and see if we can come up with what this means. So we'll talk about these 3 different organizations. One, the rural schools, secondary schools. The second one, social cooperatives with neurodiverse people. Third experience is the popular memory archives. Going into the rural schools, remember that I had mentioned the ligas agrarias. Good. So these rural schools took up the experience of those ligas. The ligas were dismantled, people killed, and people had to flee the country in '76. Lots of those people did not come back to Argentina, and some of them who did come back did not want to go back to their place of origin because they are still terrified. So they went to live in a different province, the provincia de Buenos Aires, and in the province of Buenos Aires, out of the experience they had gotten out of the work with the Ligas, they thought it was good to start rural schools that are co-managed, co-funded by the state and the community. So these are public schools, and yet the communities co-govern these schools. I will explain this in a minute. Out of the experience of the Ligas, where they saw that a lot of youngsters couldn't attend high school because the schools were too far away of their places or it was difficult to get to the school for them, they created this model by which students spend 2 weeks at school, 2 weeks at home. So that means a lot of kids and teachers live together at a school for 2 weeks. These schools also, in the year 2000, started networking with the coalitions that I have shown you on the map before that are fighting against pesticides. So I guess that the image I chose here of this spiral-like representation means that, again, knowledge is traversing time and being embodied by people who can take it up later on and come up with a new idea. This is what one of the schools look like. This is the school of San Andrés de Giles. And you see the kids working at their garden and people getting together at an assembly. There's now 35 of these schools in the territory of the province of Buenos Aires, and as I said, these schools are co-governed. So that means that people spend time and have to figure out how to meet, when to meet, how to do things. So there's a lot of figuring out how to that goes on daily in these places. 3 concepts that I want to highlight, and these are, as we would say in ethnography, folk terms that people there use, are arraigo, educación popular, and economías diversas, o diversificación de la economía. Arraigo is rootedness, being rooted, being grounded, being there, choosing to stay where you're born, which for these families is a challenge. So that's arraigo. Educación popular is what I explained, meaning that knowledge traverses home and school, and both home and school have to be attentive as to the differences and similarities maybe across those contexts that sometimes happens in conflict and sometimes it doesn't. So again, this is a place of production of something is being produced as this perspective is being used, and la diversificación de la economía means that families at these places have to diversify their workforce. They may grow their own garden, but they may also sell their workforce to someone who hires them. So it's complex. It's a complex array of practices. So what can we learn from these schools so far, or at least some of the learning points that I want to highlight? One is this system of alternation that allows students who otherwise would not be able to attend secondary schools, and if they wanted to attend a school, maybe they had to migrate to do that. This allows them to be at their territory and go to school and be at home. The other piece I want to highlight is, as I've been describing, getting together with others to care for what's common. The place where you live, the place where you learn, is a direct experience people in these schools have. And the third point is that these schools articulate amongst each other. They have created a federation. What you see there is a picture of an assembly that took place after the elections in Argentina last year. And people at these schools are very worried about this administration cutting funding, which it is. And so they meet periodically, and the theme of this assembly was how the new scenario was going to be played out, which is still uncertain. So I get into the community mental health projects. These are small cooperatives or pre-cooperative work that have been built first as so-called therapeutic experiences. So this means that at first, people who were patients at public hospitals would come to the hospital and would be granted a place to learn something or to develop something they already knew in a workshop-like format. But over time, people working at the hospital started to realize that if people suffering from challenges in their life were to be living a better life, they needed income. So there was a decision made by which professionals working at the hospitals would pair up with their patients to form three cooperative groups. So this means working together side by side, people who are doctors or psychologists, or maybe are students of anthropology that are doing their practice at the hospital, with people who are patients. And so many of these groups stay at this pre-cooperative stage. Some of them formalize as cooperative. And this experience in Argentina has been informed by the Italian perspective. Later, if you would like me to, I can spell that out. I will not spend time now doing that, but let me just say that Italy has put together policies that are very supportive of these kinds of solidarity economies at place. So that's something that I think is good, So these cooperatives, their goal of pre-cooperatives is work integration. And again, these kinds of organizations start in coalitions. So it's not possible to create these groups if there's not a certain basic agreement across patients, doctors, the community, the state maybe providing a space for these groups to inhabit. So that's what I'm calling coalitions. There's 60 of these organizations across the country in all these provinces you see there. So these are forming a network, and this network started in 2017. And that's when our team was invited to work with them and document their process. Even though our team is not a pre-cooperative of people integrated, people with neurodiverse challenges, even though our group is not, we were invited because some of the professionals working with those cooperatives knew the kind of work we were doing and wanted to elaborate and start thinking, what was it that they were doing, and think out loud. Out of that one comes a book that is at the table, Intuiciones, which is a documentation we've done together with members of these cooperatives to portray their what they're doing, their challenges, their ideas, their hopes. So again, these spaces are co-governed, and that means creating, again, very complex organizations within organizations to have assemblies, committees, different pre-cooperative groups sharing a space, creating a common space. That means a commons that we share and take care of, so on and so forth. Three concepts that I'm highlighting here is solidarity economies that I think I've been spelling it out, so it doesn't need to be spelled out again. These are the words that we use there. Work and social integration, and community mental health. This one I do want to spell because this means that their framework is that people cannot be healthy if it's not a community supported process. And in doing that, we've been documenting facts such as that the professionals working in these cooperatives also started realizing that even though the quote-unquote users of the public health system were other people, not them, because they're professionals, they started to realize by our work together, our thinking out loud, that they also suffer from mental health issues, and then this community health approach is much more beneficial to all people sharing that perspective. This actually got into the Argentinian health law. There was a law passed in 2010, and all this work that had been going on since the 90s, and actually it goes back prior to the dictatorship as well, got as a perspective of community health and human rights and social justice into the law. It's written into the law. Whether or not the law is obeyed, so to speak, that's a different question, but it got written into the law. So what can we learn from these groups? One piece of news is that, as I said, these groups started out support groups, but along the lines that they realized that people need income, they started thinking about themselves as economic groups. Not forgetting that there's more than the economy, of course, to integration, but keeping in mind that in order for people who, for example, have been in an institution for 20 years, and so when they go out of the institution, they need a place to live, they need work, they need to be supported in their relationships. So that's a key issue that these cooperative groups are putting forward. So the other points I think I spelled them out already, so I'll get into the third and last group that I wanted to portray today. Archivo de la Memoria Popular de Villa Lugano. What's that? Villa Lugano, Villa Miseria is a very derogatory term in Argentina. It means misery town. However, people living at these places have reclaimed that term to name themselves as villeros. Soy de la villa, we can. So, people use the word villero, villera. They also use the word chaman from barrio. That's another way they speak about their barrio of Lugano. The barrio of Lugano is in the city of Buenos Aires, but in the outskirts to the southwest part of Buenos Aires. It's a very difficult area to live for many reasons, and people who live there have occupied and resisted that way of living for generations. And their community organization is very fertile, is full of knowledge. And so in 2017, people who are activists in the Barrio de Colegiales, remember that I said, remember that word, okay? The Barrio de Colegiales is where our Instituto para la Inclusión Social is located. So there are some people who network with our institute who at that point started networking with the Barrio de Lugano. This is complex, so bear with me, see if I can explain that. So there were two people who are visual documentalists who, for reasons of their own, were working with Lugano, and they started to talk about, people in Lugano started to talk about documenting their own knowledge, their own practices, and their history, mostly their history. So these two people contacted our organization to see if we could work with them. This happened in 2019. So we got on board, but then pandemics hit, so we did a lot of things over Zoom and internet. And we started cooperating and collaborating with this group to help think out loud what's going on here. Basically, the question is, what's going on? And from our perspective, it's a very interesting experience to document self-organizing and the way in which decisions are being made. What you see in the pictures is youth and adults cooperating to document some of the issues that are challenging to them: living conditions, housing, the heat, cold. This is done through what this group is calling Mesa de Memoria Compartida. It's like a table of shared memory. So these tables are put at some places in the neighborhood periodically, and people who want to donate their memories come to the tables. Once a memory is donated, if they wish so, it is part of the commons. If they don't wish so, it's not. But if they wish so, they are uploaded on a site. So this is very interesting because that's also challenging some ways in which academic research works. For example, when we have to do our ethic, we file our ethic permission in Argentina, we have to ensure anonymity. Well, we cannot ensure anonymity here, for sure. But this is their decision. They're challenging some of our thinking process as we go and work with them. This has happened before to many groups with us. This is not the first time, but this is a very good example of this kind of exposure that people choose to have. So what can we learn from this experience? One is that records travel, not only because they're uploaded, but also because when people meet, talk, and word goes, and people start pointing out other people who may have a memory that they remember they did have pictures of this and that and the other. A large purpose of the documentation is related to the dictatorship. So that again is showing us that this traumatic experience after so many decades is still working in our society. The other aspect I want to highlight is that the archive becomes a commons for knowledge story that becomes useful for organizations and people to sit down and debate or argue sometimes with public servants, representatives of the government, other organizations. So this is an interesting use of an archive. And the other point is what I just commented on, which is it's pushing some of the assumptions we have about ethnographic research. So in ending, I would like to try and spell out some of the things that at least are in my mind that I'd like to share. In the backstage, in the slides that follow this next slide that I will show, there's more, but I will not get into that because I think it's important to start sharing some talk, questions, names, ideas that come up. So I'll finish with the next slide. So on the one hand, I want to point out that social solidarity economies and direct democracies are both practices and conceptual frameworks. And this means that people who are doing these practices through co-elaboration, we are starting to see what that means in each case. There's no equal solidarity economy to another solidarity economy. In other words, that was bad English, but I need to say that. Was it good? Good, so you got it. The social solidarity economies in Argentina are continually challenged, as you saw, because of our history. That's always a challenge. To choose to live this way is challenging, yet people are choosing it. So that means there's something there that needs to be spoken about, and explained and lived. So it's important, we think, also to take a long-time perspective, as I was trying to do today, to understand this. Because otherwise, sometimes when I go abroad, people say, oh yes, the 2001 experience, that, no. 2001 is one of our crises, mind you. There's been lots before and after. And this has a very long history in our country, so that's good. We know that, and it's good we understand how. It's good to be aware of that, because in people's narrations, that comes up. And I think that if we are not attentive to that kind of discourse or meaning making, we may miss it. It's good, but it's not missed. That's what I think it is. Direct decision making is important to us, and we are finding also that it provides a sense of well-being for people. Especially people like I was telling you about, for example, people who have spent, like I said, real examples, 20 years in an institution, in a hospital, because of their neurodiversity. Once they are supported to make a transition and are working with others who are seen as their peers, even though they're a different life experience, the other people are different from them, there's a sense of happiness, I'm trying to say, that comes with that. Not without tension, but yet it's a bodily experience that we can track, because we have asked permission also to document it in video, and we are seeing a lot of the body language. Remember, I was trained as a social linguist, so social linguists pay attention to that a lot. So organizations also are creative spots. They're like real life laboratories for invention. So that's good. And lastly, a collaborative perspective can support an analytic process that can be explained to others live. I would like to point that out, because it's not only by papers, conferences, what have you, that this can be passed on. Sometimes we write papers that nobody reads, right? But with these kinds of dispositifs or ways of making knowledge be known, something different is being mobilized. Something that maybe I didn't explain is that within our program, we periodically have meetings where people from different organizations come together. So that's another place where this mobilization of knowledge happens. So with this, I'm finishing my talk, hoping it was interesting, and we can share some thoughts and ideas now. That's it. I was meant for 25 minutes.
We'll take questions, and I'll just come around to. Before that, just a correction. We have Grace here. Don't go to the next slide.
My presentation is like to go on.
Okay.
But after.
Okay. So, questions, comments? Thank you, Anna. I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, so we have someone from the current administration, the government of Argentina in the room listening to what you have to say. How can you not be an enemy for the current administration? And how can you not know that? Your organization is organized, which means it's on paper, which means that the whole organized structure is public, accessible, who's who. So how do you avoid a redux of the general returning and eliminating all of these groups. What are you thinking about in order to avoid that? Because these concepts, you structured it earlier on as a dichotomy, direct democracy and a genocidal capitalist system. You didn't say capitalist system, but that's, so we already have the juxtaposition, we have the dichotomies. How can the current administration not know that and not be working on a plan to uncondition these rural communities that are teaching about social economies? It's a concern.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can answer that, actually. I can say though, and I think I shared this with some people already, so excuse me for repeating myself, but something that I can tell you is that when I was 12/13 getting into 13, I got into middle school, and I started school, and 2 or 3 weeks down the road, the coup d'etat happened. So for me, as an adolescent, that was a shock. In my family, there's missing, killed people. So I was already aware. A lot of people who are friends to my family had to migrate the year prior to the dictatorship. So I was aware. And yet, during my middle school and high school, I became an activist, political activist. I joined a political party, for which I will not say which. No, even later. Anyhow, I think there may be a split in people like me who know you may be chased after or killed. I have a brother and a sister who are 9 and 11 years older than I am, so through them I had gained perspective into activism as well. And so I was maybe, what's called like when they are cautious in that way, because not very many 12-year-olds would join the political party. So I guess what I'm trying to convey with this example is that we live in a situation, like you're saying, that is all the time challenging you, and these practices are happening all the time. Just 2 days ago, a person from this organization that I showed the picture, Ecos, was raped and was beaten at her house. There were 2 people waiting for her at her house 2 days ago. So this is our scenario. That's why I'm marching tonight. So I can't respond to your question. It's a concern. I think it is a concern.
Still processing, you're mentioning that. This question seems different. Maybe it's a good question. Thank you for your talk. You mentioned, and maybe you could elaborate a little bit more. As I understand the idea of the solidarity economy, once functioning and developing, can keep at bay the aggressive forces with economies that people can function in ways that they choose. You mentioned a question of solving problems within organizations, different visions of how organizations should run, sometimes more centralized, even within community-based organizations, sometimes a lot more work in terms of how social. You talk a little bit more about how those kind of very human-based experiences of with others, how to resolve the techniques that have kind of developed as a form of knowledge of how to, even when we keep aggressive forces at bay, hoping that we still have challenges as human beings, just working together.
Thank you for that question. In my talk, I mentioned in passing that the social cooperative experience started in the 90s as such, but I did say that in Argentina there's a long tradition of community mental health in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Part of that experience also worked very heavily on what they called group dynamics. I've just published an article on this, so I'm doing my own propaganda. If you're interested, you can read it. So there is a long tradition in Argentina of reflecting on these issues that you're very full conflict, tension. And I think when I was living at the Inés, people would ask me, is it true that in cities like Buenos Aires, there's like 2 psychoanalysts per person? Okay, so it seems like people have that representation, but that's an exaggeration. But it is true that in Argentina, there is a tradition of psychoanalysts merging with other perspectives, such as Enrique Pichon Rivera. He was the creator, quote unquote, of what in Argentina we call psicología social. And his work was exactly on grupos operativos de trabajo, roughly translated, groups that operate in the work they do. And his main point at that point, and this is the year 1957, was sin vínculo no hay tarea. If there's not a relationship, engagement, work cannot happen. Be that engagement tension or warmth or whatever. So he was pointing out to the fact that you have to conceive work as part and parcel of relationship. And so along the way, many of the groups with whom we work consult with outside people to be part of the organization at some point as social psychologists, for example. At one point, we did a repertoire, and I could give you a link to that, of the different ways in which these groups are trying to work with what you're doing out. One of these ways is bringing social psychologists in. Another way is our work, which I'm proud of, because this whole elaboration is sometimes signified as a process by which people can think out loud and solve conflicts. Another way we found this happens is through play. People use play. For example, there's a group that uses this technique that is called the company chimes. It goes like this. The meeting starts and people are debating, and as the argument gets heated, another has the power to ring the bell. So the bell means stop and think. So they give like a couple minutes, people think, and come back to discuss. These are local techniques that people have been creating to engage. I was a member of the PTA of my 2 youngest sons, now for 10 years. And in that PTA, we implemented many of the techniques I was learning at these groups. So that was very good for me. For example, one technique we implemented was of the color cards. We had in the PTA, we adjusted the technique, but we had red card, yellow card, green card, and purple card. And red meant you went overboard, stop, you cannot continue. Yellow was warning, something is heating up. Green was I agree, or how lovely what you said, or whatever. And purple was a new idea is in the happening. Because we realized lots of times we entered in these discussions that maybe nowhere, but yes, something was going on. So that was the purple. So that's something that I can share with you. A more technical, more technical information can be found in the piece I wrote and other pieces that I wrote in Spanish. But you can read it, right? No? But there's a great software called DeepL. It's cool. Right. Yes. Sí, voy por la
Okay. First of all, thank you so much for your presentation. It's really engaging, and the work that you're doing is really inspiring. Even though we live in Toronto, like I was talking to my classmate here, like there's so many things that we can learn from what's happening, through these initiatives in Argentina. So one of my questions was regarding the backsliding of democracy that we're seeing all over the globe, in every single continent, and how that kind of affects, especially I see that in young people around me, losing faith in democratic institutions, but then at the same time, feeling really lucky that we live in a democracy. So my question to you is, we were reading in your Marcelo's class, we were reading the paper where you talk about Bolivia and Argentina, and something that was really interesting was that the indigenous people in Bolivia were focusing on not overthrowing the state, but to sort of work outside the systems to build their own spaces. In your experience, when you do talk to people across Latin America and we work in this field, there is, like as you say, those economies are continually challenged, governed or restored. Do you see the same sort of trend there where people are, sorry, this is a very long, my own lecture. I'm just saying, would you recommend, in your experience, would you recommend that you work within or outside the realms of the system to organically change things over time, or do you experience now that people just want to overthrow the system, which is easier said than done, and also not always doesn't work, right? We saw that in Egypt, you get rid of, the dictator, then you get another dictator, and then another dictator. So, just kind of wondering what your thoughts are on this. If you could solve all the crises.
I was born December 25th. That's my only job. I have a son who was born January 1st, 2001. Go on. So no, I don't have an answer for you, but I can elaborate on it for sure. Something that is really disturbing to me is that, as you said, around the globe, people are choosing in elections to support candidates that go against their own interests. And for example, in Argentina, that just happened. And even though that happened, we are all making an effort to understand why people would do that, especially youth. There's lots of theories going around why the election went the way it did, and so I'm not an expert on that. It's something I do find in the people I work with, the organizations I work with. For example, in the social cooperatives, many of the people did vote in May. And their discourse was, we want change. So, of course, we can all relate to that. That's why I was talking about transformative social justice and human rights. Change, I think Jean yesterday said, change for the sake of change can be better. But at the same time, I think it's our responsibility to understand that there's frustration and that these things are long term. I guess my response to this is that we need to keep on being at the trenches, right? Trincheras. It may sound more like here, I don't know, but, okay, vamos. So, yeah, I think you need to be there on the ground, and, yeah, in the churches, yes. And so, in the mud, I would say, was our wise concept and our own. I think macro economy and macro politics in Argentina now are tending to be really nasty, very, very difficult. For example, I'm working with one of those social cooperatives, let's say, in partnership. And we've been doing a series of workshops last year to decide whether or not they will formalize. And they want to formalize their cooperative. Now, with 300% inflation in 12 months, go and figure how to do that. So when I go back home, there's 2 more workshops of that series, and then fortunately, because our corporation will be able to do work for more months. Gracias. And keep on thinking, what is the best way to approach this? Is it time now to formalize, even though people do want to formalize because of the many reasons they spelled out, or not? So I guess I'm going around your question, but my response is, don't lose faith. Keep on doing the good work I'm sure you're doing. Network. Part of my talk was trying to highlight that these things don't happen because it's one person is an illuminated person and whatever. Some people in those groups want to believe that, and that's what I was trying to spell out when I meant to say that this authoritarian perspective is ingrained in many people, even though they work in cooperative. But what I'm trying to say is coalesce with others, look locally, and we once wrote a piece where we spelled out the concept of geographical neighbors and ideological neighbors. Some people can be your ideological neighbors, yet they're not close to you, but you may find ways to network, and I guess that's part of my answer. That's
Okay, I think for the sake of time, we're going to group 3 questions together. It's 10:26, so we also want some time to socialize.
You're the manager.
Okay.
I was only in charge of the 45 minutes.
Thank you very much for that, Heras. So following your footsteps of self-propaganda, I am going to be presenting right after this on the comments. So that's where my mind is right now. And what really struck me, listening to different aspects of the comments that you presented, was the idea of the memories, the memoir as commons. And quoting you, history is what men and women do every day. So piggybacking off of a little bit what Stephen has said, this concept of the commons of memory, the commons of personal history. Have you seen signs, or is there concern that this may appear to be a threat to the establishment?
Hi, and I'm Taryn. You were the student examiner for my dissertation. Nice to see you. I'm struggling to pick a sort of area to ask you about, but I think right now I'm really interested to hear your experiences and as a scholar, activist scholar, and maybe the question would be something like, you know, thinking about your long history of deep relationship in movements and in cooperatives. What are some of the things you sort of give advice on to those who want to pursue that path?
Thank you. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I think I just wanted to say, as a woman, you know, the story that you just said about the sexual assault really resonated with me. And I feel, coming from a Croatian context, that I feel like it's
much bigger than that, are organizing is really threatening at the moment, at this time. And I feel the violence is being used to beat us into obedience. And I just wanted to say we're not all there at all. And so I just felt, not in a global affairs way, but you mentioned Italy. What are some ways that your collective on the ground connect with other women or similar projects on the ground as well that are struggling at this point with what we're faced with in terms of everything that we're doing?
I think there's, you did raise your hand, right?
That's okay.
Sure. William.
We're gonna speak to her.
William. Do I know you? No. No. Okay.
It's one thing.
I think he's gonna have to leave. Okay, so, memory, I think it's threatening, advice, and women. Yes, I think that, the archives are a way by which the powers that place feel threatened many times because of what I explained, because people at the neighborhood over time start building up arguments that they are really already did develop, but now they're backed up by other people's stories. That's your basic research, right? You say, research shows, okay, so here's in the making live. So it's a similar mindset. So yes, it is threatening. And what does worry me, I have to say, I have to admit this, is that by people taking the stance of being public, it's difficult. So it's a tension, I live this. But I guess that we are choosing to, like I said before, coalesce, keep on building links, supporting each other. There's lots of time that I spend in supporting us, supporting me. When I support people, I'm being supported. And so my life as an academic is not very usual. I spend a lot of time in assemblies, in my own assemblies. I consider myself a worker, but many national researchers don't see themselves as workers and they're not movements. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that yes, memory is threatening. There's a woman in Argentina who's top notch in these topics. Her name is Elizabeth JQL, you can say in Spanish. I can give you that reference later if you're interested. She has been insisting in that memory be kept, curated, and cared for. So that's a way to look at it. Advice. Am I in place to give advice? But maybe some insights I could share. I think that something I learned over time is that you need time to work with people. And that's why I was trying to explain, I hope I came across right in explaining that it's not that I make an agreement with someone and I go in and document their practice. I never do. And so that means that I may spend years and maybe that doesn't go into research. I don't care. Because, like I said, I do very grounded work at my neighborhood. So I learn anyhow, and I'm able to go back and forth. So I guess one of the pieces of advice I could give if I were to give it was patience. I'm a very patient person. And I can wait, and I can, some people outside my team, because of different reasons, are different. I learn from them too, because sometimes we need to, be more impatient, maybe. But patience is a good quality in this kind of work. Also is, from my point of view, making an agreement in writing. Some people in my team don't like that. And they say, well, people hate it when you do that because that comes out of academia, because you academics are obsessed with writing, putting things in writing. And I'm like, no, I learned this from social psychologist Enrique Pichon, mind you. So it's not an academic practice per se, it's a way to think out loud about what we are about to do. That may change, but then we have something that we discussed and framed together. It has happened in our history of collaboration that teams that we have worked with have decided at different points to stop collaborating with us in that fashion of documentation. And they have chosen to go into a different passion with us, for example, us becoming their sort of social psychologists. So we don't document anymore, but they come to our place to work out loud with their issues. So things change. So that agreement we had made at some point to document, just throw it because you are in a different spot. But this organization we've worked with for 15 years now. So that's why I showed all the names of the people on the first slide. And those are not all the names that people I work with. They're the ones that I talked to before coming here. We're a big team. It's complex. I love it. I'm a physical education teacher. I have an undergrad degree. So I spent a lot of time taking kids to summer camp. When you take 100 kids to summer camp, you cannot be distracted. And you need to juggle things around all the time. I'm also a history major, and I got my degree in American sociology, whatever. But my first thing is with my body in place and juggling things and making sure that if someone looks sick, they got what they needed, a camp, or whatever. If it rains, you need plan B. So that kind of complex structure, I get a kick out of doing that. Some people may, some people may not. If you're not that kind and you're to embark on this type of work, I would advise, good advice, yeah. I would advise that you start thinking about teaming up. And that entails a lot of energy because, like I was trying to convey too, there's conflict. Sin vínculo no hay tarea. Vínculo, relationships mean also, sometimes you don't agree. Out of disagreement, things happen. And women and their fights, you probably know that Argentina has a large feminist countrywide organization. We participate in every single space we can, Pañuelos Verdes. We are opposed by other women who don't see that that's the way to go. And we are opposed by the powers at play. Argentina is a very patriarchal country. So I guess that out of my own experience, I would say that women and some women, in particular for the indigenous women, working class women, Afro descent women in Argentina, have it very bad. And I guess that building networks of support across different types of women, at least in my experience, has been a good way to go. I guess that's all I have to say for now. Yes.
This has been another episode of Thinking Social and Solidarity Economy. Please consider exploring our other episodes in this series, or take a look at episodes in our other series entitled Work, Learning, and Social Change. While you're at it, And if you're watching this on YouTube, keep up to date on the latest material by hitting that subscribe button.